Hello, welcome to Book Talk. I'm your host, Anthony Moirore. At Book Talk, we get to have an author come and tell us about his book or her book. And this is yet another day where we have an interesting guest come and talk about Black Wounds. Oh, that's an interesting book. And without taking much time, but anyway, before I go on, I'd like to remind you that you can watch past episodes and future episodes from bookplacemedia.com, or you can listen to them on any of the podcast platforms that you're familiar with or your favorite ones: iTunes, Audible, Spotify, name it. Just search for Book Talk at Bookplace. And now, what we are here for, we have a guest with us and we welcome him to the show. Welcome, Lanze Thompson.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's an honor that you agreed to be on our show, and we appreciate you to come and share with us about Black Wounds. Oh, I said that's a funny title, but we'll get to go into that much later on. First, we would like to have a clue of who is Lance Thompson. Please introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So basically, I am spent my whole career in corporate America for about 30, 35 years before making a move over to higher education. So I'm currently the Executive Vice President, CFO, and Chief Strategy Officer for Clark Atlanta University, which is one of the historically Black colleges and universities located here in Atlanta, and one of the most distinguished and oldest ones. In my corporate career, I spent over 35 years in Fortune 100 companies with some of the global leaders in their industry, such as Philip Morris, Ford Motor Company, Alcoa, Con Edison, CNN, Time Warner, and then eventually ending up here in Atlanta with CNN, and then moving on to the Georgia Lottery, and then over to Clark Atlanta University. I'm originally from Boston, Massachusetts, so that's where I was born and raised.
Okay.
I grew up in the city with, my mother, father, stepfather. Got about 9 brothers and sisters. I'm the second oldest. I earned my doctorate in business from Pace University, concentrating in global marketing and global strategy. I received my MBA from Boston College in finance and strategic management, and my BA in economics from Colby College. Essentially, I've been a writer since the age of 10, and it's something that's been my passion and my blood long before I ever endeavored into the business world or even knew what those things were. I was always a writer since the age of 10. So that's kind of who I am.
Yeah. So having written from the age of 10, I guess that you have quite a number of books. How many books have you authored and published so far?
Well, so far authored and published, and my books are all available on Amazon and ebook and paperback, but I've got about 22 books or so.
22 books.
Yeah. So this book here is my latest, but I've got others that I've written over the years that have gotten, different types of platforms, different types of themes and genres, but all of them have done pretty well for their audience and capturing the imagination, which is really what I try to do, is really hone in on a story. So I think you have to be a good storyteller in order to have an effective book.
Yeah, sure. I agree to that. And it's quite impressive that you have over 20 books, and those who are just beginning or those who've never written, here you have written 20 books. That's quite some job. But you've got all the time that you have had writing them. So congratulations on having authored so many books.
Thank you.
Your present book, Black Wounds. What inspired that title, and what is it all about, Black Wounds?
Yeah, I get asked that question a lot, and actually the full title is called Black Wounds: The Pains, Scars, and Triumphs of Black America. And this is a book that I was kind of running from, that I was hoping I didn't have to write. This was something that I conceived of very early on, growing up in Boston, watching some of the the racial tension, some of the economic disparities going on in the country, and even in my college years, I did a paper rather on Black economic progress, and there I was thought it was going to be a good news story where I was going to be sharing the progress that we've made, in the Black community since the end of the '60s with all the passage of the civil rights legislation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to my dismay, I saw that we really hadn't made much progress at all. So that really kind of disappointed me. But I turned the paper in, did my assignment, and I moved on. And I moved into corporate America, thinking, okay, I'm going to be able to take advantage of some of the foundational groundwork that was laid from those movements. And I've found just not a lot has changed. Found that I had my own barriers and roadblocks that I had to navigate through, which I'm sure that's the story of many people. So
Mm-hmm.
there was a sense of frustration, and I didn't call it wounds at the time. It was just this sense of frustration of feeling like you were qualified for something and you didn't get the opportunity, or that you didn't get the recognition or the promotion, or you didn't get the position, and you saw other people who had less credentials or talent than you, who were in most cases, in my case, were white males who were moving ahead of you, and they weren't necessarily any more talented or any more experienced or effective in their positions.
Mm-hmm.
So it builds up this sense of frustration and this sense of disillusionment, if you will. But then you add to that, what's going on in general society, being pulled over by the police and being stopped and frisked for no reason, right? So I was in Boston when there was a high-profile crime case with Charles Stewart, who was a white man who killed his pregnant wife at the time, and had accused the person being a black male. So every black male on the street of Boston was stopped and pulled over and frisked and detained, even though I looked nothing like the suspect. Even though I had on a suit and tie and briefcase going to work as a professional, I was still thrown in the same category, that we all just fit the same profile. So those are things, again, that cause wounds, and you never felt so degraded. You feel violated, and you feel like you don't have rights as a person on the street, that anyone can just grab you and accuse you of something, and you're not protected by the Constitution. Then all the issues with voting rights, all the things, the barriers of trying to put up barriers to keep us from being able to participate fully in the democratic process. Going and get a home loan, and the challenges of trying to get a loan, and the hoops that I had to jump through to get the loan. And then I found out from a coworker of mine who was buying a house right at the same time, and we had very similar incomes, and we both were relatively new into the workforce, a few years into the workforce, and how his loan had got approved so much quicker and at a much more favorable rate. So again, these things add wounds to your spirit, wounds to your soul, that you live in a world that is causing these kinds of inequities and these kinds of feelings of sometimes inadequacies in you. What's wrong with me? Why do I have to go through these things just to enjoy what others seem to enjoy more freely? So long way of saying, I was hoping not to have to write this book, even though I was living through these experiences. But then, when the Rodney King video played, and we all saw him getting beaten down in the street by roughly 5 and 6 cops, and we figured, what, we know that and the Black community has always known that those things have happened, and we made those accusations, but no one believes us. We don't have credibility, which is also a wound, because other people can say things and they're taken on their face value. You say things and you're discounted, or you're not believed. So we felt like, okay, this video is finally going to be the evidence to show the world what we had been talking about, we had been experiencing. And when those officers were all found not guilty or acquitted, something inside you just dropped, and again, the pain of knowing that you live in a world where you can treat a man like that and beat him in the street like a dog, have the evidence, video evidence to show that, and still not get justice for that. So that was, again, all these experiences leading to the chapters of building Black wounds. But then something amazing happened. Barack Obama got elected president. And then I said, well, you know what? Maybe the country has turned a corner. Maybe it has learned, and maybe it has found its sense of moral compass and footing, and it's moving in a good direction. But then you saw all the challenges and roadblocks and things that were put in front of President Barack Obama for him just to do his job
Yeah.
on behalf of the American public, and him being branded the way he was branded and insulted and disrespected. You've never seen that happen to any president, no matter what their politics were or what your personal agreement or disagreement was with them. You never treated the office or disrespected the president in that kind of manner. So that told me, no, we still have some issues going on. But then somewhere around, we started seeing one high profile case after another with starting with Trayvon Martin, and then Michael Brown, and then Eric Gardner, and then, of course, culminating with George Floyd. One case after another of an unarmed Black person being murdered at the hands of the police or someone acting as an agent of the police in some capacity, like with Trayvon Martin, with George Zimmerman. And realizing that while I could tolerate the inequities in the workplace and not getting maybe the promotion or maybe not getting the raise that I thought I deserved, what I realized what I couldn't tolerate was watching our community being beaten down and physically assaulted and threatened just for going outside, just for driving a car, just for walking down the street with a bag of Skittles. That's when I said, you know what, there's something really wrong going on in this country, and it needs to be called out. Yeah. And these other issues have been underlying it, but I think the brutality and the physical assault has really come to the surface that just says, because we haven't dealt with these other issues, these assault issues seem like we've given society kind of the green light to treat us any way that they want to treat us without standing up and fighting back and saying, no, we're not going to tolerate that. Yeah. So eventually I realized that I do need to write this book. As much as I was hoping America had progressed to the point where it was not necessary, I realized that no, this book needs to be told. These stories need to be shared. These experiences need to be felt. And we need to show our history. In spite of all these challenges, we come from a very rich, strong history in this country, and going back to 1619. And that was another issue, just the whole 1619 project, where we started debating whether it was a harm to this country to tell the history of this country, starting at 1619 with the first African slaves who came over here. That if we taught that history, that we were somehow doing a disservice to America, that we were somehow trying to brainwash America into hating herself or to not appreciate all of her accomplishments in spite of that. And I thought that was just so crazy and so disingenuous. And I'm a serious history buff all my life. And I look back at some of the great societies and civilizations that we study, including the Roman Empire. You do not tell the story of the Roman Empire without the story of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Sure. You don't tell the story of the Roman Empire without them crucifying the Jews and feeding them to the lions, or the Christians feeding them to the lions. You don't tell the story of the Roman Empire without them enslaving almost every major country that they occupied and bringing slaves into Rome to help build their roads and build their buildings. You don't tell the story without those things. In fact, we celebrate those things on Christmas and Easter with all kinds of biblical stories. Sure. But that doesn't detract from the accomplishments that Rome has achieved. You don't tell the story of Egypt with its accomplishments in mathematics and science and in communication, with the building of the pyramids and the Sphinx. But you don't tell the story of Egypt without telling the story of the Jews who were enslaved in Egypt for 400 years and brought out of captivity by Moses. So you don't tell the story of those countries and their history, no matter how ugly that portion of the history is, without telling the full story, and it does not detract from that country. But in America, we've been brainwashed to believe that if you tell the story of the coming of slaves into this country in 1619, the treatment and the institution of slavery and the treatment of slavery and the battles and challenges since slavery, that we are somehow doing a disservice to our country and to those younger kids and students who are coming up behind us. And I just think that is completely a false narrative, and is meant for propaganda, and is meant for a particular purpose, which is to keep Blacks from fully knowing and understanding their history and their accomplishments, Because if you know where we've come from and you know what you've achieved,
Mm.
then that gives you the kind of optimism and sense of pride in what your future can also be.
Yeah, sure. It's always good to assess where you are standing, look where you're coming from, and have a vision of where you want to go. Now, with all this history that we've had in America, and it's been open to the world, and what people have experienced, the Black community, the African American, and it's unfortunate that still the evils keep on piling day after day. And so it's important for someone like Lance to come and give a voice out there, shout out there, and give a book like this one so that people can get sensitized of these issues, and we see if there's a way forward with the
Right.
action that we are going to take from what we are being driven into.
Right.
So
And
thank you.
to your point, and that's what that was also one of the purposes of this book was really to create a dialogue.
Mm,
I've worked in corporate America all my life, mostly the only Black manager, the only Black VP, very few Blacks coming behind me.
mhm,
And so I've heard over the years, and I've had some very good white colleagues, very good friends, some who've really helped my career and really helped promote me and mentored me.
mhm,
And one of the things that I understand is that sometimes, white America, because we don't talk about race and we don't teach race, you have grown adults who are in
yeah.
corporate America, leading organizations, leading government, leading politics, who don't really understand race
Mhm,
and don't really feel comfortable knowing how to broach the subject. So
mhm,
this book, I'm hoping, exposes some of the things that happen in our community and throughout our history to those who sincerely want to learn and who want to have a dialogue, an honest dialogue, and ask questions and open up their curiosity and open up their minds. There are
mhm,
going to be those who read this book who are going to say, that resonates with me, and I knew that was happening, or I knew that those experiences were real, and so it validates them. They don't feel like they were crazy. That sometimes you're made to feel like you're the only one. You're paranoid. You're making this up.
mhm,
That there's something wrong with you. You're trying to uh, 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 not accept accountability, responsibility for yourself by blaming
mhm,
all these other things in society. So there are
mhm,
going to be those who are going to say this exactly is kind of what I knew was going on, and this just helps validate my feelings, and now I can go forward, not knowing that I'm not crazy, and now I can go ahead and do something about these things. Then
mhm.
there's going to be those who are going to read this, and they're going to say, I don't care.
Yeah,
Um,
they're
you
always
know, you don't you whine and you cry and you want handouts and all this other stuff, and everyone has to go through certain things, and
there. Mhm,
and I've said this to one of the audiences before. I understand that many great societies and countries have had slavery. Many
mhm,
people have been enslaved, but I don't think any country, and you can't show me, at least I haven't seen it yet, where the country where the slaves have been freed and they had to stay in the country that they were enslaved, and then that country put in place laws and rules and institutions meant to keep you at a subservient second class citizenship. So,
mhm.
so that's one of the differences. I have friends who say, "Oh, well, I got cousins who come over from Eastern Europe and they started a business or they bought a gas station." And I said, I have cousins who grew up in the city of Boston who were denied a loan to buy a shop to open up a restaurant. I've
Mm,
got cousins who try to buy a house, and in their covenant it says that you're not allowed to sell this house to a Black person. I've
mm,
had friends who said, I know the laws on the books in some states in this country still say you're not allowed to marry a Black person. So they don't have laws that say you can't marry an Eastern European. They don't have
yeah,
laws that say we're not going to give a loan to a Chinese, or we're going to
mm,
not give a loan to someone from Italy. So
mm.
there are very specific things in this country that have been set up that are aimed specifically at Black Americans. So
Okay.
you can't discount that, and you can't act like the whole playing field is even for everybody coming over trying to compete for the American dream, because it's
Mm,
not.
mhm.
But in
Now,
spite of that, we still have to succeed. We still have to put our game face on, and we still have to go out there and compete while we still work to make the rules in the landscape more fair. We still have to play with the cards that we're dealt.
yeah, sure. We keep on moving, we keep on fighting, and keep on winning where we can. Now, for curiosity purposes, what's the composition? For those of you, those of the viewers that are not in the US, what's the composition of the US? Or maybe you can start with Boston, where you grew up. What's the composition between of the white and the African American population?
Yeah, so for the most part, blacks make up about 12% of the population.
Okay.
And that's always been, historically it's been 10%, but most recently, as whites have not been reproducing as fast as other races, so their
Mm-hmm.
percentage of population has decreased.
Mm-hmm.
So blacks make up 15 or 12%, but Hispanics have been the one that's really been growing at a very high rate. So I believe they make up now, I think they passed blacks as the largest minority. So I think they're about 15% or so.
Okay.
Um, and then you have all others, such as Asians and non-Hispanic and non-blacks,
Mm-hmm.
who might be somewhere around I want to say about 7% or so. And then the majority, so then the rest is white Americans.
Mm.
So you can see that we still make up a very small percentage of the total, 12%, Hispanics 15%, so that's about 27%, and then Asians and other about say another 7%. So that's about 32%. So I would say whites probably make up about 68% of the population in declining, as Hispanics are really growing at a much higher, faster rate than any other group.
Oh, that's a small percentage for the African American. And the reason that I asked this question, maybe it's an interesting concept that came into my mind. I was asking now, for the 100 and over years that America has been in independence, you want to tell me that Obama was the only Black American? Couldn't have there been another, African American president before him? I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
mm,
And Obama was the 44th president of the United States. So
yeah.
that meant 43 presidents before him were all white male.
Mm,
And the first probably five to seven or so presidents were part of the founding fathers. And they came right out of the revolutionary time period. And many of them were slaveholders.
yeah.
And many of the senators and congressmen were slaveholders. So
Mm-hmm.
so and I think that's important to understand, because again, you talk about going back to critical race theory in 1619. These are
Mm,
just facts. Our first presidents were they owned slaves: George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and that that influenced their way of thinking.
mm,
That if you owned slaves and you saw them as property, you probably weren't writing legislature that was seeing blacks as human beings and looking to promote their human rights.
yeah.
So these things affected how you governed, affected how you wrote laws, affected how you designed society, who was to benefit under what conditions. And that's a fact.
Mm-hmm.
And so it laid the foundation for what future Black generations would have to try and navigate through, deal with, or unravel.
Mm,
Okay,
mm-hmm.
our Constitution states that a Black person is two fifths is a property and worth two fifths the value of a white person.
Mm-hmm.
These things are written in our documents, in our laws,
Oh.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then when you look at the pay of a Black person, it's about 2/3 of a white person. To this day,
Mm-hmm.
that's over 400 years that ratio has kind of maintained itself between 66 to 70% of what blacks earn versus whites. That
Yeah.
was written into our that was written into our laws back in the founding of this country, and it has maintained itself throughout. So when you say that these things are just one-off, random, I find it hard to believe, because it's so well maintained and it's so persistent throughout the history of this country.
Mm-hmm.
And so to answer your question, though, could there have been more blacks who were eligible to be president? Absolutely, yes. Because
Yeah.
when after the Civil War and Reconstruction, you had more blacks who were represented in Congress and their districts, the new districts that they now were found themselves free citizens in, and you had more representation at that time period than you did to this day. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then there was a campaign to beat back our political participation and representation through intimidation, through unfair voting taxes and polls and literacy tests that were illegal, that most most educated Americans probably wouldn't even have been able to pass. So there was a campaign to, right from that time period, to beat us back into our place, to not get too much growth and representation politically, economically, and socially.
Mm. It's good to get all this insight from you, Lance. Thank you very much. And coming back to your book, what's the format of your book? I mean,
Yeah.
how? Yes.
Yeah, so the book itself is a hybrid of poems, original poems, and the poems are meant to communicate the mood and the emotions.
Yeah.
So you can watch something happen and you can observe it and you can see it, the facts, but that doesn't necessarily convey to you what it meant to you and how you felt from it. So the poems
Mm-hmm.
are meant to do that. But then
Mm-hmm.
there's a series of narratives, research-based articles, that talk about, from subject matter experts, from distinguished schools and research bodies, that present facts to say, this is what's happening in the Black community as it relates to private prisons. This is what's happening as it relates to healthcare and disparities in mortality rates between Blacks and whites. This is what's happening in terms of the numbers in terms of unemployment, and our youth being unemployed, and not more of our youth being in jail versus going to college. So I wanted to share those things because, very early on when I was kind of having these discussions, and before I wrote the book, but just having a discussion, someone had made the comment, well, that's your opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to say, yes, there are things in here that are my opinion and how they affect me and my emotion, but I also wanted to prove that there were things that were just basic facts that subject matter experts also have written on, have researched, and have come to the same conclusion. So
Mm-hmm.
so you can't refute the fact of dismissing it. Well, that was just your opinion about that. Everyone else thinks we're doing well.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of those two things. But the book itself is five sections. The first section is outlining the current state of Black America as it exists in 2021.
Okay.
And there's an important piece of information in there that came right from Congress, from the Economic Congress Commission, on their own words, on the disparities that still exist in Black America between the rest of certainly white America and other groups. The
Mm-hmm.
second section of the book is called it's oppression. So it's talking about the oppression, the wounds that we are inflicted from oppression, living in whether it be police brutality, whether it be not being able to get a job, or whether it be just a high unemployment rates, or not being able to get the kind of pay that allows us to take care of our families. So these things cause wounds that we deal with and we try to suppress, but we never heal from. We never address them, and they get passed down from generation to generation to our kids. We may not call them wounds, we just call them frustration, or we call them, just can't get a break, or whatever the term is we use. But we pass these things down to our kids and to our family and to our community. The third section is called Life in My Hood. So it's talking about just what it's like now living in the inner city. What is, the things that are there, the challenges, the livelihood, the people, and it also balances out that there are things that we do in the community that we have to take accountability for and that we have to be responsible for.
Yeah.
Even though these things are happening in society, we don't have to shoot up our own neighborhoods. We don't have to provide drugs to our kids at young ages and put them on the corners. We don't have to treat our women the way we treat them and pull young girls out of school and put them in trafficking, sex trafficking rings. So there are things that we do to ourselves. And that's true of any society. So it's not necessarily unique to just the Black community. Every community has that element that is destructive and non-productive. But we need to be aware of those things and not allow our greater challenges and issues overlook those things that we can have more responsibility and take more action on. So
Yeah.
that's section 3. Then section 4 is the scars from racism. So it just really goes through the history of racism in this country and the organizations such as the Ku Klux Klan who are still allowed to exist today. Do you know any other organization that can go out and and destroy property, burn crosses on your lawn, grab your children out of their house and beat them, rape them, hang them up from trees, and still say they're in existence today. It's a shame. In a democratic country that says it's for the rule of law, you got organizations with this history that still exist today, that still are able to get a permit and march in a parade tomorrow if they wanted to. Okay, so it talks about those scars from racism and what it has done to us. And even though others may have moved on after the event, and it becomes a statistic, or it becomes a headline, the family whose father who was beaten and hanging from a tree, they never heal from that. That's a scar they carry forever. You talk about Emmett Till's family, George Floyd's family. Okay. Those scars will never go away. And we know that those things were done not because the person did anything that was an affront to anybody or an affront to society or to the rule of law, simply because they were Black.
Yeah.
That was their sin in the eyes, and that was their crime. And they were convicted and killed for that by a mob in the open field with members of the community. Sheriffs who were supposed to protect us, judges who were supposed to be impartial, clerks, bank owners, store tellers who wave in your face and sell you stuff during the day, putting on the hood at night and dragging you out of your house at night. These are the people who have terrorized the Black community since the end of the Civil War, with the Reconstruction period. And they've been allowed to continue. They've been allowed to shape the narrative to say that these statues and these Confederate flags are a celebration of American history. These are traitors to the United States. These are people who took up arms and fought against this country, fought against the Constitution of this country, killed American soldiers, and yet they're celebrated as heroes. You would never see that in another country. That the traitor who took up arms against you is allowed to flourish side by side with you as celebrated heroes. Schools named after them, bridges named after them, government buildings named after them, statues aligning all kinds of city halls and government buildings, even including our nation capital. Never. If any party took up arms against them and killed as many innocent lives as they took in the pursuit of their evil ambition, would we be still celebrating them 200 years later? It's crazy. Okay, it's crazy. So that's the section, the scars of the scars from racism, and then the fifth section ends with the triumphs of Black America and Black excellence. Because I want to leave off with, in spite of all this, we have still had a successful, amazing accomplishment throughout our history, and it should be recognized and celebrated.
Ah, that's beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. And yes, thank you very much for that highlight, for letting us know the sections of the book that you've written. And at this point, I want to thank all the viewers who've been watching us live. And I will mention two of them who have commented. We have Vivid Chris, thank you for the comment. We are live. Itweka Hannah, thank you for being here with us, for listening, and thank you very much. Every other person who has not been mentioned, I see we also have Ali Pasha, we have Franco Frank, we have Great Ayub, and many others. Thank you very much for tuning in to our podcast today, Book Talk. And a reminder, you can still go get those other episodes at Book Talk. On the other podcast platforms. That's Book Talk at Bookplace. So at this point, since we've been highlighted of the sections of the book, I'm curious, I'm interested to hear a bit of it. Can you give us, and once I look at it, it's made of poems, and yes, poems are many.
Yeah.
I like poems, so maybe you can give us the pleasure of listening to one or two from.
Okay, I think there'll be two that kind of gives you good context and framing of what you can expect from the book.
Yeah.
So this book, this poem is called Black Lives Matter,
Okay.
And the fact that we even have to say that, and there was the protests, and there was the opposition to that, was just
Yeah.
astounding to me. So this is kind of what inspired that poem.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so Black Lives Matter. Black lives matter because all lives matter. And Black lives are a subset of all lives and will no longer stand to be oppressed, exploited, and murdered. Black lives now demand equality, justice, and peace. Black lives now demand economic opportunity and social freedom because this is what all lives endeavor to freely pursue without the clouds of fear, threats, discrimination, incarceration, violence, or death. Black lives refuse to accept that our value is only 3/5 of the value of all other lives, refuses to be denied equal pay, promotions, bank loans, education, and opportunities to purchase our own homes, to develop generational wealth, break the chains of poverty, despair, inferiority, and worthlessness. Black lives deserve to fly to fulfill our potential with the same pride, confidence, and encouragement as all lives. Black lives matter because all lives matter, but only Black lives have to remind all other lives of our God-given right to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. Only Black lives have to remind all other lives of our God-given right to breathe.
Mm. Beautiful. That's
And then
beautiful.
this last poem that I leave, that I've gotten a lot of good responses from in terms of being very uplifting, um, is called Black is Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Glittering stars against the beautiful black canvas of night, providing limitless, everlasting sight. The diamond that emerges from hardened black coal reflects its brilliance through my beautiful black soul. My beautiful black skin illuminates humanity, erasing its plainness, ordinariness, and lack of diversity. Rich dark chocolate, exquisite to the taste, bringing alive all my senses until they explode in happiness across my face. Exploring through the universe in awe of the black hole, searching for my beginning when my spirit was whole. Too long, the black sheep of America's family, too often the unfortunate victim of hate-filled calamity. But with the Black Panthers' strength and grace, I continue to excel beyond time and space. Like the precious rarity of the black swan, it is precisely my blackness that enables me to weather every storm. Black is strength, beauty, and authority, despite those who would have you believe its inferiority. Black is beautiful, and all the world can see that it's my blackness that makes me strong, makes me special, makes me me.
Mm. It's beautiful. Ah, black is beautiful. Thank you very much, Lance. Such beautiful poems you've got there. Now, as I was looking through, I find a topic there that we could be interested in knowing much more about. You talk about the privatization of the U.S. prisons. Can you please tell us what about that?
Yeah, so what we've seen, and again, there's a whole pretty well documented articles in here with some references, but all societies have crime,
Mm,
and you need a way of dealing with crime, and you have a legal system, and a policing system to police people, and then bring them to a judicial system that would then evaluate their claims, and then if they're found guilty, then they're convicted and they go and serve their time, and with the intent of some kind of being deemed to be worthy of reform.
mm,
And you do your time and you come back out and you get reintegrated into society. Well, somewhere in America, somewhere around and it's been really going on for a long time, but I think it's gotten more and more sophisticated somewhere around the 80s and 90s, where we started outsourcing the building of prisons
hmm.
to private companies. And
Okay.
any private company is going to look to make a profit. I mean, that's what they do. You invest capital. We're a capital society. You invest capital, you need a return on that money. So these prisons are being built for the purpose of making the profit. And some of the participants in these prisons, where you have conflicts of interest, you find that some of the participants in these prisons are actually members of the judicial system, sheriffs, prosecutors, judges. So if you've got these people investing in these businesses, and the businesses need to have full capacity in order to make a profit, there's a conflict of interest that I'm going to start sentencing people to longer sentences, whether it was deserved or not. I'm going to start arresting people who aren't really doing anything that would warrant arrest, but I'm now arresting them and putting them in prison, because just like with a hotel, I make money when the hotel is full. So I make money when the prison is full. And so we've seen this explosion of young blacks being taken off the street, taken from their communities, being convicted of minor things, such as if they had marijuana on them. So they were getting more time for marijuana, while others in the same situation who were non-black were getting maybe probation or a fine. These kids were now getting a year in jail or 2 years in jail. And then while they're in jail, they get into some kind of altercation that adds more time to their sentence. So now what should have been maybe a 1 or 2 month probation is now turning into a 5-6 year sentencing for kids in black communities. And it's been going on, and we called it the war on drugs, which really meant permission to go in and police our communities in a very aggressive military style way to put them in these prisons, so that these companies are making tons of money off of having, and again, the majority of blacks in these, and you'll see that some of the numbers in the book. So as I told you, blacks make up 15% of the population, but in many cases, in almost every state, we make up over 60 to 70% of the prison population.
Oh.
How can that be? The law of nature, the law of average, the law of statistics says that is not possible. Something very specific, something very intentional is going on to make those numbers be the way they are. And it's true in every single state. There's not one state, even when blacks don't make up that large percentage of a population, we still make up an over-indexed amount of the prison population.
Interesting.
So that's and you've seen work around this with prison reform and lower sentences and trying to give probation for violent offenders and so forth. So there's an effort and awareness around this, and there's initiatives going on to try and combat some of this. But for too long, it just was the way it was. That's the way this country's laws operated, and the judges who have leeway to impose sentencing, and how they impose sentencing when you have a white youth in front of them who they believe has a future in front of them, and they still believe that they're salvageable, versus a black youth in front of them who believe this is a person who's only getting started in their criminal career, so I'm going to nip it in the bud and put them where they belong now. So all these disparities play into this, and we act like it's not. But when you have a country that can't even deal with its come to reckoning with its own racial tensions, and folks get socialized a certain way, these biases come into play. You may not even be aware of your own biases when you're looking at one defendant versus another, when you're sentencing one person versus another. We're human, of course. We're going to be products of how we grew up and what we believed and what we've experienced. And so those things come into play. And if you've never really dealt with black people, or you've never really felt that blacks have gotten, they're in those situations because of what happens from the time they're 4 years old. They're born into a society that is not giving them, the economic opportunities or good schooling or good housing. And so you're almost putting them on the path that they're going to end up in front of you at some point in time. And lo and behold, they end up in front of you. No one's surprised, but now you're just meting out the sentence that they're going to be living in one of these private prisons for a long time.
Yeah, another question I ask here, Lance is going to tell us, what part have we to play now, since we are going to read the book and get sensitized about the situation, about the wounds that have been affecting America? What part are we to play, those who are in America and those of us who are outside of America?
Well, yeah, I think within America, I think we have to be more active. We have to be more
Mhm.
proactive in local politics.
Okay.
So a lot of times we get galvanized around national politics, national elections, such as the president race. Certainly with Barack Obama when he ran, President Obama, and then with the last few elections with Donald Trump and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Um, but I think a lot of what affects our quality of life is on the local level. Who's the
Mhm.
local sheriff who's
Mhm.
arresting our kids? Who's the local jailer who's putting these harsh conditions for them to have to live in, setting them up for knowing that there's going to be some infraction that they're going to get more time? Who's
Yeah.
the local judge? We most districts elect their local judge. Who's the local judge who's handing out these long sentences to some of our kids? Who's on the school board who's deciding on what resources go to which school? And why aren't resources going to neighborhoods that look like ours? Who's on some of these other commissions that dictate whose trash gets picked up, whose streets get cleaned, whose neighborhoods get the investment for new stores and new shops and new types of services, healthcare services. So I think a lot of while we focus up here at the top, I think we have to be mindful of a lot of this happens on the micro level, and we need to be very in tuned and active and proactive at that level to realize who we are electing or we're not electing, but they're being elected and they affect our life, our day-to-day life.
Mm.
So I think that's one of them. And then I think we still need to continue to fight on a national level. We need to continue to challenge the inequities in voting laws, in pay,
Mhm.
and we need to continue to challenge the enforcement of discrimination laws in the workplace. We need to still challenge the country to look to get rid of laws that promote discrimination. Whether it be through our policing, through through the healthcare system, or through just the overall general education of the resources that get set at the Washington D.C. level that get allocated to the states. So
Mm.
we need to be active at all levels, but I do say that we need to be particularly active and aware at the local level.
Okay. Beautiful. And we who are outside here to read and keep on spreading the news in the media, in the social platforms that we have. That's what I think. That's my guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Lance, for all that you've shared with us today. Now, for those of you who are watching, thank you also for being with us. But we would like to know where can we get how can we get to connect with you, Lance, and where can we get the book?
Yeah, so the book is available on Amazon. So if you go on Amazon, you'll be able to put in my name as well as the book title, and it should bring you to my author. Well, it will bring you to the book page, but you can also go to my author page, which will show you all my other works as well that we spoke of earlier.
Oh, beautiful. And now, before we get off the show, I always ask our guests to leave us with a few words that we will always remember. This is your time.
Well, I think we're in a we need to be aware that we're in a very uh, intense battle
Mm-hmm.
for equality and for justice and for peace in this country. Um, and, 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 and I think America has to realize that it cannot have true peace and true reach its full potential until it reconciles with the Black community and the wounds that the Black community is facing and it's been feeling for a long time. So it has to realize this is not a Black problem. This is an American problem. This is a problem for all of us because it affects every aspect of our country. And we saw that, with George Floyd and the protests over the summer, or that summer of 2020, that you can't go and rope yourself off from this. It's going to affect every aspect of this society because people are not going to stay in their own little um, uh, uh, small cabins and allow society to go on unaffected by the wounds that it's causing to us. America, the Black community is going to want America to feel its wounds and to understand them and realize that it can only be one peace in this country and it has to be peace for everybody.
Mhm.
There can't be a white piece and the black America is catching hell and going through hell, and we both think we can coexist side by side peacefully. That can't happen. So it's an American problem, and America has done a very great job of having allies outside of the black community who have been empathetic and who have been proactive and who have been instrumental in helping us move forward and make progress. So we need to continue that. So we need to continue the fight. It's a long fight. Yes, there's been some progress that has been made, but there's still such a long way to go. And sometimes you get tired. You're thinking that we've been at this so long, or you just want to believe that the battle is finished. But we have to stay active, stay persevering, and be willing to pass the baton on to the next generation to continue this fight. And I'm hoping that at some point in time, we're going to see generations that we know, whether it's my sons or my son's sons, where this is no longer necessary, that no one else is
Mhm.
going to have to write a book such as Black Wounds, hopefully sometime in the future within my lifetime.
That's our great hope that things are going to change as we continue to speak out and as we continue to get to know much more of what is happening and what we can do. So, once again, thank you very much, Lance, for this honor to be on our show and highlight us on Black Wounds. And to the
Thank you.
viewers, we also thank you very much. And yes, it's a pleasure having Lance on our show. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
And bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.